Hi, everyone. I'm Tanner Smith with the Miller Group. I'm a commercial insurance advisor. I have with me today Chris Miller and Aaron Paris.
Hey, I'm Chris Miller. I'm Vice President at the Miller Group, third generation Miller, working in construction with bonds and insurance and helping people with their safety and insurance programs.
And as I just said, Aaron Paris is with us as well. He's really the brains behind this conversation. He is our safety director here at the Miller Group. Aaron comes with an extensive safety background. He started off with Lee Summit Police Department and being a part of their SWAT team, and then moved his way into the private sector where he helped manage safety programs within a couple different companies before joining us here at the Miller Group. And so our discussion here today is just looking at safety and what things business owners can expect coming down from OSHA primarily, moving into the next year, 2 years ahead, and especially with a new administration in office. So with that, Aaron, can you just kind of walk us through any big picture items that you see coming down the pipeline from OSHA specifically in the next 1 or 2 years?
Sure. With the new administration coming in since January, it's kind of been a whirlwind of what's going forward. They're obviously not taking any breaks as they move forward to make sure that they get their agendas taken care of. Particularly, the new administration is looking at adding a new head of OSHA, Department of Labor. Who that particularly is going to be looks like it could be Marty Walsh, who's a former Boston mayor. He's got extensive background in union, and he'll be the first, I think, union head of the Department of Labor in over a half a century. So with that, that's a new direction for them as a whole.
And what does that mean for our clients and for construction, manufacturing, transportation?
As you probably most people experience, if you're privately held and you don't have any unionized workers, the difference in what that looks like can be somewhat apparent sometimes. I would assume with a more pro-union approach, you're going to see a drive for higher minimum wage on the federal standpoint. You're going to see some probably loftier goals for the employees and making sure that they're driving union goals across the board through OSHA's standards.
Over the last year or so, we've dealt with a lot of change, as you know, with COVID-19. Are you expecting to see any kind of changes with respects to new infectious disease standards coming out from OSHA over the next year or 2 years?
Yeah, so there was a new executive order. It was called Executive Order on Protecting Worker Health and Safety that was just issued not too long ago. And in that, OSHA's been tasked to determine if there's a new standard necessary for COVID-19. And in that new standard, they're supposed to determine if there's supposed to be an emergency temporary standard. And if there's an emergency temporary standard, they're supposed to make that decision by March 15th. So that'll be coming up pretty soon if that's decided what's needed. Temporary standards are different. It skips the normal process requirement for public notice, public comments, and then any kind of public hearings. And so they're allowed to generate a placement of rules immediately. And then from there, they would have to mandate a standard after 6 months. It still would take potentially 26 to 60 months or more to establish a final rule, though, even going through this process.
Going back to big picture with changes on OSHA, what types of changes could you see start implementing now or within the past years, that not the ones that are taking a couple of years, but what changes are happening now that people need to be aware of?
Well, through the same executive order, they're increasing inspectors. They've got down to as low as 700 approximate inspectors, and there's a drive to increase that number. And as you increase inspectors, that means you're going to have an increase in inspections. Increase in inspections has a likelihood of an increase of citations. And I think that's already being evident as you're seeing more and more citations being listed, which that's another throwback to a previous administration during the Obama years. They were listing anytime there was a violation publicly. So just in the recent months, February 17th, a plumbing contractor in Kansas City area was cited, and they were cited for almost $300,000 for violation. And then on the 23rd, a Missouri Auto Parts in Kansas City was issued $15,000 citation. both of those are not necessarily been deemed to be already held out to be accurate and true. That's just what they were cited. And so OSHA is trying to use that as a deterrent factor to make sure everyone's complying more.
So Aaron, you and I have done, a handful of walkthroughs of some of our clients, and what are some of the most common things, or if you had to list maybe just one or two as you walk through, whether it's construction, manufacturing, and even come down to safety culture within the company, what are one or two things that really stand out to you that you can see like, hey, we have a problem here, or there's just something that the company really needs to focus on?
I think pretty regularly, the number one thing that is easiest to recognize when you come in is general housekeeping. If a place doesn't appear that they're taking the initiative to keep things orderly and in place, it opens up for other issues, trip, slip, and falls. And when you have those kinds of incidents happening, it's easy to point to one or two particular circumstances, but the reality is it could be a greater cultural issue, as you kind of alluded to, as far as what is the culture of the company. And, we actually are just released or will be releasing a blog post about the broken window policy, or the broken windows theory of policing, which pretty much says that if you allow small pieces of crime to occur, it inherently invites more crime to an area. So if you have a broken window or graffiti, it invites more crime. Whereas if you were to take time to correct those issues, then crime seems to think that people are paying attention and will stay away from there. And it kind of seems to be the same thing with safety. If you have equipment just placed all over the location, it doesn't have its particular place in a manufacturing setting. On a job site, you have, debris all over the place, cord strung all over. It just kind of sets the tone for what's expected of an employee and what the company then has for the safety of that general site.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, it's in the details, it's in the small things that really make the difference. And it kind of just alludes to how serious the company is taking safety as a priority with their employees. Couldn't agree more.
And that it's the little things that you can change. You don't need a dedicated safety officer to do general upkeep. So a company without the resources to hire a full-time safety person, you can still do the little things, right?
Yeah, I agree. It's at the end of the day, you don't need, not everyone has the ability or the means to have someone like me at their disposal. But that's kind of the nice part about coming on board with a group like the Miller Group, is it allows us to provide that service in some capacity, depending on size and availability that we have to provide to them. So,
hey, Aaron, would you just, if a company is getting ready for an OSHA inspection, well, I guess my question is, how should a company get ready for an OSHA inspection if they know one's coming up, especially?
Well, usually they don't know they're coming. So the best part is just making sure that you're working regularly to continue to eliminate your opportunities for risk. And, the OSHA just came out with the top 10 most cited incidents in the last year. And, I just posted on that the other day, and the top 10 doesn't really change too consistently. It's usually about the same. This year, there's a little, mix up on a few of them, but they're all the same numbers usually.
What could someone do if they're interested, or they've said, hey, we've had some minor violations in the past? I mean, what would a good first step to fixing those be? I mean, other than just addressing that they have an issue.
If anytime they get a citation, the first step is following through with, whatever recommendations OSHA has of remediating those. And if they have concerns going forward, I think, contacting their producer or their account executive, should they be with us, and working out an opportunity for us to get together and kind of determine how we can make them reduce the risk going forward is, I think, the best opportunity.
No, I agree. I mean, ultimately, you don't want to pay the fines, but even more so, you want to make sure you've got a safe environment for your employees. And that's what OSHA's ultimately there for. So they're the bad guy, but they're not. They're looking out for the good of the employee.
We talked about a culture of safety. What is it then on your side of things that you feel like it affects their rates and their premiums, a company, when, you notice that they have a culture of safety that's not really at the level that we're talking about as being attentive to that risk.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've talked a lot about this. I mean, there's companies along the entire spectrum. I mean, from people who don't care about safety and don't care about the employees, they're just checking a box when this stuff comes up, all the way to the best in class. They're doing everything. They're leading their industries and safety and training, and other companies in their industry are having to go learn what they're doing right because the owners are saying these guys know what they're doing. So obviously, indirectly, those guys are going to get the best premiums. Joe Schmo down the street who has no safety, doesn't really care about it. I mean, he's most likely going to have, it's not if, it's when he's going to start having claims, and that'll ultimately hit his insurance premiums. So it's about your outlook and your willingness to do something about it and take the time to invest in not only your safety, but your employees' training and PPE and everything else that you can offer for them. So I don't know if Tanner has any thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, I mean, the number one thing that I look for when I sit down, especially if it's a new client, but even existing, is just making sure that they're taking the safety program as a number one priority, because it drives so much, just how the company operates, not only just from a financial standpoint, but just from a morale standpoint. So as long as I see that the company leadership is really trying to take reign on their safety program from top down, I feel comfortable working with them. I know Aaron does too. The second thing I always look for is just going to be the loss history. What's their loss history look like? Are they having a frequency issue here, and that will tell a story in itself? Or do they just have that, once in 5 years or so, statistically, everybody's got that large claim, and there's usually a story behind that can kind of be explained as well. But the number one driving factor that I look for that it actually does help with rates is when you explain the story to some of our carriers on how important safety is to them, and the measures that they're putting in place from a cultural standpoint to mitigate as much risk as possible to make sure their employees go home at the end of the day.
I think with the change and drive of new inspections, I think it's going to affect, your clients, particularly Chris, in the field, and then also, a lot of your clients in the manufacturing, Tanner. Do you have any advice particularly that you would give to your clients, particularly with, the experience you guys have had on the loss and risk side, looking at the potential of more inspections?
I would say just very simply have a plan. Think of it before it happens, because the last thing you want is something to happen and your guys aren't prepared. They don't know what to do in case of an incident or an inspection or whatnot. They're just floored because they've never seen it before. So having the training and the planning ahead can really help in the event of something not going right.
Yeah, and the caveat on that, Chris, is just to make sure that the internal employees, whether it's just supervisory level, are taking ownership of that. So going through and doing safety inspections, safety audit, once or twice a week at least, just to point out those areas of concern, and having multiple people do it so it's not the same set of eyes, so they can catch different areas of concern that they need to address, and just kind of identifying any other safety issues. And that also includes the CEO maybe stepping in there once in a while just to kind of look at things just on the floor, to provide the other perspective as well.
Well, I appreciate you taking some time to talk to us about all the changes in OSHA, and I mean, ultimately how it'll trickle down to safety and insurance rates and whatnot. But hope everyone's found this helpful. And if you're interested in sign up for our commercial bulletin blogs, you can visit us at millercares.com or reach out to any of the three of us to learn further, or just have a conversation to see if what you're doing is up to snuff with your industry and your competitors, to make sure you're not falling back.
Yeah, well said, Chris. Couldn't agree more with you. And thanks again for joining us today, Aaron, to talk more about safety and just upcoming concerns that we're seeing just from OSHA and the way ahead.
Yeah,
Thank
happy
you.
to do it, guys. Appreciate it.